This is Colleen Allen. I'm from the Autism Alliance of Michigan. I am the CEO, and I'm thrilled today to be able to have a conversation and learn a little bit more from Frank Campagna.
Yeah.
Um, so sorry if I butchered that a little bit, Frank. And the topic, of course, today is around communication, but certainly, we can talk broadly about other challenges that our population of individuals with autism face every day. Frank, it's fabulous to talk to a dad who's living it every day. And in as much as I can bring a professional perspective, I'm absolutely happy to do that. All of this, of course, is setting the stage for the Living with Autism event in Troy on April 5th, which is going to be a fabulous opportunity. Every year it is for families to learn, to network, to support each other in a day of information exchange. And so they'll have an opportunity, of course, to hear Frank as a keynote. And then the Autism Alliance of Michigan will also be present, and I believe we have a couple of presentations that are planned for that day. So why don't you go ahead and start with introducing yourself and talking a little bit about your son, and then I will go ahead and give a little bit of my own background.
Sure. So my name is Frank Campagna, and I've been writing a blog called Autism Daddy since 2011. I have a 15-year-old son with severe nonverbal autism and also with epilepsy. And back in 2011, I just started writing about my experiences raising a kid with autism because I felt like there wasn't a place on the internet that really showed the realities of what being a special needs parent was all about. A lot of blogs were all very sunshine and rainbows, and God wouldn't give you more than you can handle. And while that's great, nothing was really showing, the day-to-day struggles and the joys and the struggles. And so I just started writing daily about my experiences, and slowly but surely people started to follow. And fast forward 7 or 8 years, and I've got over 150,000 followers on Facebook. And now I've started doing public speaking and go to conferences around the country, just sort of talking about, the topic of my presentation is things no one ever tells you after your kid is diagnosed. And it's sort of like a reality check for parents of like, you're going to learn all the obvious things, but there's a lot of these little things about raising a kid with autism that no one ever tells you. And it's meant to be funny. It's meant to be serious. It's meant to, pass on some good information, but all from not from a teacher's perspective, but from a parent's perspective. And so, like I said, my son is now 15, and, the struggles are different than when he was 7, but they're still there. And, I feel like my blog has evolved and my page has evolved, just like my son has evolved over the years.
That's great background. And I do want to make a comment about that. I'll first just give my own background. So I actually have a clinical background in speech and language, and was in practice for 20 years before assuming this role as president of the Autism Alliance of Michigan. And so while I'm really not directly connected to children and families anymore, our work is really surrounded by advocacy and helping service providers and getting families to those services that they need. We do a lot, like I said, a lot of work around advocacy, but community inclusion and awareness, and what do we need to do to help laypersons understand autism, to better include people in our neighborhoods and our communities. And then certainly around employment and finding jobs for people on the spectrum. And then, independent living, which is very broad, but goes anywhere from those later teen years to young adult to adulthood. But I want to go back to something you said, and let you know how much I appreciate your voice, because I do worry that what's recently portrayed in the media is the higher functioning, and I'm using air quotes, the higher
Mhm.
ability, those individuals that have degrees and can't get jobs. And we know that there are challenges. I'm not minimizing that, but I don't think we talk enough about those that are nonverbal, those that, maybe they're not going to go to college and hold jobs as in finance or IT or engineering. And we need to be talking more about that segment of our population. So I think your voice is really important, and we certainly want to be able to help push that out as much as we can too, because there's families really feeling left out. Well, my child, we hear quite a bit from families that will say, that person over there, that's not autism. That's not what I'm living every day. My child and their challenges are far greater than, an individual who may have a degree, who may be able to drive, who may be able to get a job someday. And again, I'm not minimizing because they're just different. They're different kinds of issues. So I didn't mean to take too much of the conversation. I'm happy to speak broadly on any topic related to autism. Maybe we should focus though on the communication piece, since this is really a core deficit around autism. And can I just ask, what what does that look like for you and your son? How do you communicate? How do you communicate with him? How do you know what he's feeling? Maybe talk to that piece.
Sure. With my guy, it's difficult. Like I talk about in my presentation that my kid is still, basically he has no true formal method of communications. They've tried a lot of things in school over the years and in his early years of text and sign language, and none of it really stuck. And his way of communicating is literally taking me by the hand and leading me to what he wants. And even that is relatively new. I mean, in the last 4 or 5 years, he's one of those kids that, in a good way and in a bad way, is very easygoing and malleable. So, like, people are always telling me, like, maybe he can be like a Carly Fleischman, where he's got this communication device and he uses it. And I would love that from my kid, but he's also one of these kids where he doesn't have the frustration. Like, I don't see which is a good thing as a parent, but all the kids that have these amazing breakthroughs, well, not all the kids, but a lot of the kids of have these, sort of these frustrations of, like, can't get my words out. And then you finally give them this device or this method, and they're successful. My guy is very malleable, very easygoing. You offer him peanut butter and he'll eat the peanut butter. You offer him grapes and he'll eat the grapes. Like, so there's not that frustration for communication.
Well, I think you raise a really, really important point when it comes to communicating, because there's the how and the whys of communicating, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and we're incentivized to communicate when we have reasons to do so. And if you don't always have incentive, there's something you really want very badly, or something that you feel is not being understood, it drives you to want to do that. And then for somebody like that, you give them the means. It's signing, it's pictures, it's the technology that's available now. But if there isn't an incentive to begin with, I think that's where you're going to be more challenged. So, in younger children, we talk about creating communicative temptations, putting items out of reach, or, hiding something of interest, or, locking a box with toys inside of it to encourage a child to come forward and want to communicate with a partner. But if you're happy and you don't necessarily need to have that particular food item or that particular object of interest, it's sort of okay. You haven't created the incentive, or you've tried and it just hasn't worked for an individual.
Right.
Yeah, that
The
makes
one
sense.
thing I will say before we, move off of communication, the one thing that I talk about too in my presentation is the idea that, even though he presents as severe and this took a while to get to this place, I try to treat him in an age-appropriate way. So he's 15 years old, and I try to speak to him on a 15-year-old level. As much as you don't always know how much he's letting, grasping, and how good his receptive language is.
Right.
But after reading a lot of books and after talking to a lot of people, we think that he's grasping way more than he lets on. Yeah. So, there was a while there where we might have been guilty of treating him like a toddler or talking to him as like a toddler for years after that toddler phase went out. But now, really trying to make a conscious effort to expose them to age-appropriate media, television shows, and just treat him, age-appropriately. And it's hard to remember that when, you're still doing things that you feel like you're doing with a toddler. But it's something that is always in the back of my mind, which, it took me a while to get there.
Good. It sounds like it's going to be a great presentation. And again, Frank is going to be speaking at the Metro Parent Living with Autism event on April 5th in Troy, and we'll have some information on how to register. But really, those are really important points, and I think forgotten. And I think that being on the other side of a person with autism who struggles with communication, we immediately go to, well, their cognitive level or their comprehension level must be where their verbal level is, their expressive language ability. And that's typically not the case, right? So reminding yourself that this is still a person, this is still, a 15, 16 or 30-year-old that I'm communicating with. And I think even a lot of therapists are not always cognizant of that, and bringing out, the little kid toys when you're presented with a teenager who they're perceiving to not be at an ability level that they're really appropriate for. So do you get the sense he does comprehend more than what he's able to say, or do you feel like you have to make some adjustments in terms of receptive language as well?
I think it comes in spurts, and there's times where it seems like he's grasping way more, and then there's other times where you'll say, pick up your hat, and he'll hand me a shoe, and I'm like, oh, come on, dude, you know the difference between. So it's all about what's going on in his head at that moment, or what other things are occupying his time, or if the TV is loud, or so there's sometimes where I feel like, wow, he's really on it today. And other times where I'm just like, he should have, I feel like he's grasped that already. So it's always a 2 steps forward, 1 step back with my guy. And at least
you bring out another really important point, which is, with autism, there's a lot of unpredictability. There's a lot of inconsistency. Again, from a professional standpoint, it's the most challenging, I think, the most challenging part of working with this population is that your lessons learned from one client or one child or adult don't always translate to the next. And there's just such uniqueness that makes the population, I think, so rewarding to work with, but also challenging because you have to, everybody's different, really different in their capacity and what works or doesn't work. And, one strategy I would offer for communicating with people who are nonverbal close is really to use the context as much as possible, and that makes the message more predictable. If you're in a kitchen, if you're sitting down to eat dinner, that it's more likely that the topic is going to center around what's in front of you. And so when that changes, or you're now presented with a less familiar environment, you don't have context to bring understanding. And so it's that can sometimes be helpful.
Right.
In those situations. So is he getting programming through school too, I assume? Okay.
Yeah.
And have you been happy with what's been happening through special education programming for your son?
Yeah, I mean, he's bounced around quite a bit over the years, but we're finally in a school that we love, we're in I live in New York, so he can be in this school until he's 21, 22, depending on when his birthday is. So knock on wood, we found our home for him, and he can be there for the next 7 years. But it took a while to get to this place, and in New York, it's supposed to have a lot of the best schools in the country, but it took us a while to find the right spot for him. And part of that was just where he was, and part of that was, you know, me as a parent not really navigating well in the beginning, and now I feel like, we're finally at a place where he's in the right place.
Yeah, that is just so critical, and we have some schools that are doing a fabulous job, and I never would point to any one teacher that I think could have been doing a better job, because I think our teachers can only do well in as much as we support them and give them the resources and training they need to work with the population. But for families, it's a lot to coordinate in terms of assuring special education programming is meeting need, building in clinical programs, whether that's speech or OT or applied behavior analysis, or sensory integration, whatever that may look like. There's a lot of pieces, and when those are working right, it I think gives families that peace of mind. And when they're not, it's got to be hard to sleep at night. I have to imagine.
Right.
But well, he is very lucky to have you, and we're all lucky to have you at the upcoming Living with Autism conference on April 5th. And again, the link to that is at the website metroparent.com/autism. And we'll both be there. So looking forward to seeing you in person. And hopefully we'll have an engaging audience with lots of great questions. And thank you again for sharing with families the importance of really understanding this segment of the population. We need to hear more of that.
Thank you so much. Yeah, looking forward to being out there next month.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thanks.